but all around this idea of experiential learning and the idea of giving students authentic experiences, and knowing that we are in a time in this country and in this world where these kinds of activities may on the surface seem like they are maybe harder to pull off or more daunting, but in reality, these are things that our students need more than ever. We're in a time where students, outside of having these kinds of experiences, are feeling restricted. They're not feeling like they're getting as much brought this together, who have contributed, who have helped us host this event. It has been a great, great pleasure, and I know I have learned a lot in these conversations. And also just a reflection. We've showed some different video clips as we've gone, and just as powerful as it was to hear the student panel earlier today, every time I see these clips of students talking about their experiences, regardless of whether or not they've been part of our program or they're connected to another program, I just get so deeply inspired and excited and fired up about where we're all heading. And that is really what we're about to talk about here. And I know we're a couple of minutes short of the top of the hour. So I'm going to hold off on completely passing the baton at this point, because I don't want anyone to miss the dynamism that's going to be this last session. But that's what this last session is about, is moving us away from intriguing and interesting and curiosity that comes from conversation, which is very, very important. But how do we do more with what we have in front of us? How do we actually light the fire? How do we instigate the activity, get the action happening? I was just referencing with someone that I work with yesterday that one of my challenges, my personal challenges, leadership challenges, is because I have an action orientation, I oftentimes struggle with patience when it comes to something that I see, something in the future that I want to have happen. And I think action orientation is really, really good, and it's important right now. We need to have patience through all of this, but the idea of actually figuring out what are a few small experiments, what are a few actions we can take as a result of this powerful conversation that will turn into something that will be real and not just live in our minds or in a note that we took that we filed away. How do we actually begin the process of building that inertia and that momentum? And that is what this last session is all about. It's go time, as the session says. And so I am so thrilled and excited to introduce a friend of mine and a friend of the CAPS network, Tom Vander, who's the CEO of Getting Smart and has a vast background in business and in the foundation world. He's going to be our moderator, and he's got a tremendous panel of folks to introduce to you. So Tom, appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here, and it's all yours.
Thanks, Corey. Great to be with you. Getting Smart team is a big fan of the CAPS network. We'd love every young person in America to really have the opportunity to experience experiential learning, where their community really comes to life and where they have a chance to figure out what they're good at, where their interests are, and where and how they're going to start making a difference. So we love CAPS, and it's been great to see the growth over the last couple of years and see more and more young people across the country have access to experiential learning. We have a terrific panel today to wrap things up for you. Jessica Brown is a fellow at the Stanford D School. She learned the design trade at Business Innovation Factory with our friend Sam Seidel. She's got a great background in design, and we're going to dive into her work around prototyping workshops for teacher teams. We love that topic. Think it's super timely. So Jessica, thanks for being with us. We're going to be by Learning Policy Institute. She was at XQ before that and was a school coach at New Tech Network. She literally wrote the book on deeper learning, and is going to talk a little bit about the background on deeper learning, but with her, we're going to dive in to a little bit more detail on performance assessment. Last but not least is our dear friend, Chris Unger. Unger, you must be like the godfather of experiential learning, right?
I don't think that. I think I would go with Dewey, maybe, or you know.
Maybe it was Dewey, but you're like the modern incarnation. You're like the Johnny Appleseed of
Johnny Appleseed.
Experiential learning.
Appleseed, yeah.
If experiential learning comes up, they talk about Northeastern and Unger. Usually people don't need to say Dr. Unger or Chris. It's like Unger.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, happy to be here, Tom. Thanks.
Chris, I'd love to just kick things off with a couple observations on the day. What did you hear that you're super excited about?
So there were, a number of things. I thought it was a fantastic day. I wasn't able to be in each session, but the sessions that I was in most sessions. And I think that I'm going to build on some stuff that you've been talking about, Tom, for several years now. The place I'm going to start is with students. We had six students or alum from these different schools, BV Caps, the Science and Math Institute in Tacoma, those guys well, Olympic High School in Charlotte, North Carolina, and then, One Stone out in Boise. And if anybody didn't get a chance to go hear the kiddos, I guess young men and women, talk about how that experience in those schools made a significant difference in their lives. And here's the thing I want to point out. The question that came up was, so how is experiential learning not vocational education?
Right.
And, one could say, well, it's sort of like a glorified or a vocational school on steroids, this stuff, let's get them jobs, right? But the students and all of the educators that joined us from across the country said that the real difference maker is that the students began to see and identify what they were interested in, what they were potentially passionate about, and had a sense of agency that they could pursue what they were interested in, the lives that they wanted to have. So Tom, to your point, I think you're coming out with a book on this. Like beyond, it's not a vocational track. It's an uncovering of who I am and how I don't want to be in the world and how can I contribute to the world. And that sense of agency through the relationships, through the connections, through immersing students in the real world is the difference maker, I think, with experiential learning. It's not creating a vocational track. It's creating an opportunity for students to discover who they are.
I love that. Chris, I'm going to interrupt and talk about, I'm a new fanboy for Jamal Bowman. He just elected representative from New York. He founded and was principal of a middle school in New York City. Unbelievably eloquent interview on Ed Surge podcast this morning. He talked about shifting our maniacal focus on achievement, reading and math scores, to a path of fulfillment. That achievement is still an important measure, but what we most want are young people to have fulfilling lives. And so helping them discover their strengths and interests and where they're going to make a difference is really aided by experiential learning. So it's a broader definition of success. It's a broader definition of learning goals. It's more learner-centered. And it sounds like that's been the focus today.
Very much so. I think that is very so. And I ended with this last thing that, Tom, I was building on you. You've been able to visit, I think you said it, 2,500 schools. I'm trying to get my way there. Maybe I've been at 200, maybe so far 250. But you say, go see these other schools. What I basically challenged everybody is, go talk with the students who have graduated from these schools, learn from them. You don't have to fly there. Let's figure out a way for you to talk with the students and how these schools have made a significant impact on their lives and the way they view themselves and how they can contribute to the world. And we can create a movement, because it's really, you know, there's nothing like listening to the students, I think.
Great comments in the chat. Keep an eye on those. Appreciate from Ken, purpose, meaning, in intrinsic motivation. Monica Martinez, thanks for joining us. You literally wrote the book on deeper learning. Would love your connection. Would you connect the two ideas of deeper learning and experiential learning? Not all experiential learning is necessarily deeper learning, but how do you think about the connection there?
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Not experiential learning is deeper learning, right? And so deeper learning, the difference is, you know, multiple competencies, of course, that folks talk about, right? Agency, self-direction, collaboration, communication, but it really is the ability to have conceptual understanding around disciplines and subjects, and then to be able to apply it. So you're not memorizing facts, but you're understanding the conceptual underlying pinnings of any type of discipline, and you could apply it across disciplines, or you could apply it to projects and to solving real world problems. And it was interesting because, Tom, you know this, I was just on another webinar around the value of deeper learning schools and performance assessment for higher education. And we got the same questions we get every time we talk about deeper learning. What about content? Are these students really prepared in a challenging learning environment with curriculum? And it is all of the above. We've had this conversation around 21st century skills for 25 years now. It's both. And it's actually a deep understanding of your content and the ability to apply both of that as well as your skills. Tom, I think you're on mute.
Monica's book is a must-read. What's the title of the book, Monica?
It is so long, but Deeper Learning, how 8 public schools are showing innovation for the 21st century.
If
something
you Google
like
Deeper Learning and Monica, you'll find it. It's terrific. We had a chat comment about the time, the fact that deeper learning and experiential learning really take bigger blocks of time.
Yes.
Monica and Chris would love to have you both comment on that idea of how do you create space and time for deeper learning? We'll start with you, Monica.
Yeah, and I'm sure Chris is going to have some really great comments about this. But I think, you know, given COVID and how we're moving to maybe some students in, some students out, it's actually going to raise this question about time much better. How do you have fewer teachers with fewer students? And block scheduling is unfortunately a simple answer to it. Now, of course, we don't want to do sit and get for 90 minutes or 2 hours or 80 minutes, but you minimize the number of times students are rotating, but they're with the same teachers and they can go deep into content. And then my only other example, and this, don't want to have any post-traumatic stress for anyone around smaller learning communities, but it really is returning back to these small house systems where you have 100 students and you have at least 4 core teachers that cycle through with them.
Love that idea. Chris, anything you want to plug when you think about creating space for experiential learning?
Well, I don't hope that people don't throw barbs and arrows at me, but I often just say, you know, tell me what your schedule is. And if they tell me there's a 7-period day and it's English, math, social studies, and science, I just kind of go, I mean, aren't we beyond that right now? Are we doing 45-minute blocks? Can we get kids in 2-hour blocks with multiple teachers? Why do we have to call it science when it's actually science and art and humanities? I mean, you know, you can look at the schedule and all of a sudden say, okay, this is what you think about learning. So we need to break it out. Schools are doing that. There's lots of ways to do it. But as long as we keep to that timetable and that structure, we're a long road.
Ken, again, appreciate the advocacy for integrated projects. Monica, I mentioned that you are a leader at New School Network. Everybody in that network uses big blocks for team taught integrated projects. So great example of school architecture and schedule supporting the learning model, all in support of deeper learning. Yeah, thank you. It is depth over breadth. So it's being really choosy about what you want to focus on and giving kids time to go deep. Jessica, I really love the work that you're doing at the Stanford D School. This summer in particular seems like a terrific and important opportunity for teacher teams to prototype new learning models. Maybe you can describe a couple examples of projects that you're supporting that are really timely, both responsive to the pandemic, but also get at experiential and deeper learning.
Yeah, first, I really appreciated some of the earlier points made, and the way I'm thinking about a lot of this work is how are we dissolving the line between things that have previously been kind of sectioned off, whether that's like experiential learning, deeper learning, equity work, like how are we really integrating as one thing, like one cannot happen without the other. And so as we think about kind of prototyping and how folks can approach it, I guess I can talk a little bit, get deeper into the how later, but just a little bit about my current work right now is focused on neuroscience and culture. So how people learn, the science of learning, and really tapping into the deep kind of experiences and knowledge that we all have and are building from birth, and how can we as educators pick the stickiest examples and experiences that help young folks really grapple with learning.
Hey, Jessica, I'm going to interrupt a minute. A lot of people are having a hard time hearing you, so we'd love to get a little bit more volume if we can.
Let me switch headphones.
That's better.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
And
Is
Jessica,
this better?
Yes, way better. And so if you can actually share again what you're sharing about the science of learning, because that was so important, and we missed most of that.
Yes, yeah. So I was just saying that my fellowship right now is focused on the intersections of learning and culture. And so when we think about like this process of prototyping and experiential learning, I think about it as a way for us to like dig into and like surface some of the stickiest examples that folks already have in their head and have been developing since birth, and using those examples to connect to and like build neural pathways that just can solidify learning. Sorry, I'm like not sure where I was and where I'm going. But yeah, so when we think about like the how of prototyping, the prototypes are just kind of early versions of ideas that we can test and get feedback on. Somebody that we work with as a coach often describes it as empathy work with props. So when we think about like even the title of this session, like it's go time, like prototyping allows us to design and dig into work that is messy and iterative, and that prioritizes empathy and learning from others and communicating very deliberately and experimenting rapidly. So there's a lot that in this time that uncertainty doesn't even cover it. Like in this time where we feel so much urgency and so much turmoil, there's a lot that design can offer us, especially in surfacing voices that aren't often heard. I don't know if I should stop there or if I should go more into the how. Tom, let me know.
Let me ask you a how question. So a lot of superintendents are telling school teams, you have to adopt a platform now, and we want you using a curriculum that'll work both in school and out of school. I guess for reliability, but I guess the big question for you and our other panelists is, how can we do blended learning that doesn't suck, that isn't all flat, thin, kids clicking through multiple choice questions? So for you specifically, how might you create a design session with a group of teachers that would allow them to prototype a blended model that incorporated experiential learning? What would that process look like?
Yeah, so it starts with that big question that you just offered. So how might we make experiential learning and blended learning not suck? So the first thing that we have to do when like breaking apart that question and figuring out what we can do and what we can test within it is really thinking about what we could learn from a prototype. So what are all the different kind of how might we questions that fall under that? Like with each prototype, we don't have to figure out everything. And I think that's something that we often want to do, is just learn as much as we can in one go. But actually the value of prototyping is splitting some of that up and learning very rapidly rather than putting all of our eggs in one basket. So we begin to break apart that statement by maybe thinking about the best experiences that we've had so far as we've been online, right? What have been the bright spots? What's brought the best of what we've done in person into this virtual setting? So then how might we bring the best of what we're able to create in person online? And that gets you a layer under and a layer deeper into your overall question. So the first step, I would say, is just make it actionable and start to dig into the different layers of the overall experience or big idea that you're trying to create.
Do you use a single design thinking methodology at Stanford?
Yeah, so it's a both and. So there's both kind of the approach, the design approach, which has your things around reflection and empathy and really learning from others and testing and reflection again, and then getting into kind of final stages of sharing things out with the world. But there's also these mindsets and these design abilities that we've really been focused on in more recent years. And folks have described it as if the design process is the recipe, the mindsets become like the training that you get to become a chef. Like the difference between just following a recipe and having all those tips and tricks, like, oh, I need a little bit more salt, pepper, whatever it may be. And so those things, those design abilities are those ideas around learning from others, communicating deliberately, experimenting rapidly. There's 8 of them, and of course I'm not going to hit all 8, but synthesizing information and all that. So,
I love that. So design thinking is really, it's a mindset and a methodology. It's one that you typically use in a workshop environment. Feels like a really timely opportunity for teacher teams to use short experiments to promote more experiential learning this fall. Corey had invited audience members to list some short-term actions that they could take that would prototype experiential learning. And so we're starting to get some example of those in the chat.
Tom,
I'll invite, yes, Chris, add your own example or pick one out of chat.
Just a quick, I like what Jess is saying a lot, but so I had the unfortunate experience of talking with some high school students about 20 years ago, and I asked them, what would you like to learn outside of school? And they said, what do you mean? We don't learn outside school. and it blew me away.
Yeah.
And so if you think about a methodology or a mindset, I actually think that the greatest mindset we could really afford students in this time, or at any time for that matter, is how do you learn in the real world? Who do you access? What information do you access? Who do you talk with? And in a sense, if learning is getting a lot of content and memorizing it, we're really missing the boat. It's how the real methodology is, how do I direct my own learning? How do I direct my own learning in the world? And who do I access? And so that way, teachers should be affording students the opportunity to find other people, other option, YouTube videos, other resources. But really, we should be doubling down on like, how can we learn in the real world? And how do you do that as a student?
So Chris, our friend Grace Belfort commented on this point and Monica's point. So thank you, Grace. Barbara asked a question that I'll pose to Jessica and Monica. Would it make sense to have parents as part of the design team? So Jessica, I'll start with you. Do you ever include parents in a design workshop? How might that work? When's it appropriate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the entire communities are like, this is a really good opportunity to get communities involved in the design process. So yes, for parents, for teachers, for students as active participants in the design process. We're doing a lot of futures planning work right now. So this exact question of imagining how we take big ideas into the next school year. And in that, that processing and thinking, we definitely want to bring as many folks to the table. It can be really, it can be within our nature to, again, like try to figure everything out and present it to folks at the end, but it saves so much effort and energy if we're actively engaging and getting folks feedback and iterating alongside with them as much as possible.
Thanks. Monica, do you have examples where parents were brought into the process to promote more experiential learning?
Yeah, and I would add that we can look at parents as co-teachers, right? Just like the co-designers that Jessica talked about.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the part of the beauty of schools that engage in deeper learning is, it kind of goes back to Chris's point, is the community and the families in the school become one. It's all extended learning, so it's not this bifurcated and false, here's school where you learn and here's where you don't learn, in your family and at community, which is completely counterintuitive and wrong. And so a lot of folks are, it's really a little bit like your work, Tom, around experiential learning. They're taking local community problems,
right,
and they're bringing parents in, whether it's virtually on Zoom or into the school, to kind of give firsthand experience of the challenges in the community. It could be as small as recycling, trash, pollution, any science project. Completely engage the parents. I still remember one, and I think it's in the book a long time ago, where the kids learned about energy and how it was, how it kind of went through the house, how it, how you could save energy. And they came home and they had a tool to measure the appliances or to study like where they were losing most energy in the winter in Maine, right? This was Casco Bay High School and King Middle School, expeditionary learning schools. And so learning is everywhere, and families and community members can be the co-teachers. I
love that. Lydia Young said, if I've learned anything today, it's about it's collectivity. It's parents, students, community members, that we can answer these questions together. So thanks for that. Corey, thanks for being provocative online. Jessica, like how and where do these workshops take place? How might we do these things virtually now? It seems like a challenge trying to scramble in the next month. Have you seen good examples of design charrettes, design symposiums, workshops held virtually? How are people doing this?
Yeah, so actually right when we kind of, as a K-12 lab team, came together right before we began sheltering in place, really thinking about that question. And as folks who like believe that design's entire purpose is to be in service of others, we're like, how can we show up for our communities right now? So we actually led a hackathon that brought together folks who were focused in how, like, so my particular area was thinking about our overnight educators, which is what we were calling families who all of a sudden were more engaged and or really needed like some extra support from schools or from any entity to really help guide an educational experience and or just heal and process what we're going through. So we're thinking about all those tensions and balances. The other groups are focused on students and then educators. And again, we took some of these big ideas around what are we going to do, and chunked them into kind of smaller pieces that we were then able to create some prototypes. And that can look at like a bunch of different ways. For some folks, that was just post-it note storyboard of like, here's the experience that we imagine, and here's a tool that will help us get there. Other folks created a video, like imagining an app or a text-based platform. Folks thought about how we can already utilize what exists in schools. So how can there be greater connection using the automated phone system that allows you to like send out messages to parents. So folks were just really thinking outside of the box. And then similarly to this session, we had a moment of like, okay, how do we take some of these ideas into our context? And so that's one example of like us coming together on some whiteboarding platforms online and just guiding folks through a process.
So Jess, we've got a great design tip in the chat. It's called a failure fiesta. So I love this idea. There's been some urging to dive into this more. Either a failure party or a failure fiesta. Robin mentioned that. That's a great comment. Any panelists have a comment on that of encouraging a little bit of risk taking, Monica?
Well, I like your focus on risk taking, and I'm curious, Jess, in the design world, if failure is still the term, because like some people have really started to want to get away from the term failure, so that it's never seen like on that type of, again, kind of you succeed or you fail. So in a lot of these schools, you really set up a learning cycle, and the learning cycle is that you show what a high quality project looks like when it's completed. And then you set up different phases where students are prototyping or either putting together a draft, and then they're getting feedback, and then they're improving on their project. And then they might even have a couple more rounds before they show it. But it's interesting because some people have really started to lean away from not using the word failure. I'm not sure what other word we'd use, but at a lot of these schools, and High Tech High is probably really kind of known for this, is teachers openly talk about like, wow, that was a bad project I gave you guys. I didn't, I made it too hard. I didn't give you enough time. And so, because someone in the chat said, how do teachers model it? That's part of the culture of a school that's focused on deeper learning, is you have this learning cycle, but teachers are with the students just like they are in really kind of prototyping and putting feedback.
Could I chime in with it, Tom, real quick?
Go.
I would like to, I'm a really big fan of design studios. So, it's almost like ceramics. You don't know exactly what you're molding, but you're working on it. And I think that instead of failing, you're working on something, right? And and to your point, I listened to this podcast with you a couple of days ago, Tom, and you said one of the best things you could do is go see other schools, right? But we should be running virtual design studios
Right.
with all these schools, because if we're siloed in our classroom, if we're siloed in our school, if we're siloed in our district, if we're siloed in our community, we can't learn from one another. So break open the walls. We have that. We're doing that now. We're doing it virtually. Connect all these people. Let's create some design studios and get people to start design. And to Jess's point, you know, you don't have to be perfect. It's not about being perfect. It's about learning. The only way to learn is to take a risk, try something out, and do it as in partnership with the students. Engage in design. So in the same thing, we want our students to be, and our youth to be design oriented. Let's get design oriented ourselves.
Yeah. So I love this
Oh,
idea.
I love that.
Jess, Lydia's asked about how educators can model failure and risk-taking. That seems like a terrific question. It seems in a world where the problems are getting more complicated, it feels, to promote experiential learning, we have to be more comfortable saying, I don't know, or how might we? Maybe you can give me another example of how educators could model that sort of behavior that would invite young people into sharing a risk-taking experience.
Yeah, I love this reframe and this focus on risk taking, because it connects so deeply to how we build our sense of self-efficacy around certain tasks. Just neurobiologically, like in terms of how we learn, we rely on our past experiences and our past knowledge. And then when we're facing a challenge that doesn't seem to have some of those things that we recognize, it could be some of the challenges that are coming up right now around truly building a society where everyone can thrive, for example. When we are grappling with those, and we may not have the greatest sense of self-efficacy or ability to take risks, it really, we really have to connect with what we value, and anything that could kind of get us started on that path to learning more and to experimenting more. I think in terms of like failing and risk taking, we think about it as like this constant cycle of iteration. So like not putting in all these big investments. We talk about like sacrificial prototypes, if you will. So like it's the first pancake. It's your first pancake that's, the pan may be too hot, the batter may not have set quite right, like, and it may not look the best. But as you continue to learn and to grow, and even in that like quick experience, you start to make small adjustments. And I think that is so key when we think about prototyping and risk taking, is modeling the small adjustments as we get new information.
Thank you. Love that. Go, Monica.
I just want to add one more thing that kind of comes from the science of learning, and it supports design thinking, but is maybe more educator speak, right? Like human beings, we're naturally curious, and that's really what we want to tap into is our students' curiosities, and we want to make them inquirers, right? We want them to think about and be curious and ask and explore, and I think that's what you don't get in this.
Right? So I want to, it's true, Monica. I the last 72 hours I've been on this thought experiment around curiosity and equity. So would love to have you weigh in on this. My sense is that inviting curiosity does require, first of all, that we have a trauma-informed environment that's really thoughtful about, have we created a safe place for everyone to authentically enter, and then created permission for them to exercise curiosity, right? It feels like it takes meeting basic needs, creating safe spaces, and then creating room and inviting people to enter with curiosity. Jess, does that make any sense to you when we talk about curiosity of making sure that you've created environment and room in order to introduce and invite curiosity?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that like the curation of the space that we're talking about that invites risk taking and invites and fosters this kind of natural curiosity as Monica's talking about, like that makes a lot of sense. And to one of Chris's earlier points, like that is actually learning. Like we are not empty vessels that can just be poured into. We have to be making those connections. We have to be feeling something. And so, yeah, that I'm totally on board with that thinking.
I love that. We had a question about how to help free students and students and families from the paradigm of testing grades and college prep. I asked my colleague Jessica to dump an El Paso blog that I just posted last week, because I think that's one of the best examples in America where a team went into a district that had been taken over by the state, totally focused on test prep. The only curriculum was release test items. And then with a lot of help from New Tech Network, turned the district to a focus on active learning. But it started with community conversations about what's most important, building a new dashboard, building a set of community agreements around active learning. And then the superintendent, Juan Cabrera, reminded me a couple days ago, he didn't in 5 years mention state accountability or testing, right? So he went from a place where that was the only focus to focusing on a broader set of goals, whole child, social emotional learning, project-based learning. So feels like a good example of the answer to that question, but I wonder if any of you want to add on to that of how can we create more, what's the leadership role to create more space for experiential learning?
I mean, first of all, Tom, thanks for that blog. That is really profound, actually, to see that shift. And that's really amazing. And kudos to New Tech for being there to help. I mean, you hit on one key thing, and it's always kind of what we forget. And nobody ever likes to talk about vision, right? But you have to redefine success. And if you can't redefine, and some of the folks lead with a graduate school profile, which is great, whatever it takes for everybody in the community, families, and
it's a new shared picture of what good looks like, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then someone used that word collective before, right? Yeah. And then we have a shared collective responsibility for all of us, making sure we can help our students align to this new definition of competencies or success.
There's been such a great parent thread in the chat, and I just want to say that, again, if you invite parents into the conversation and you say, how's the world changed? As a result, what do you think kids need to know and be able to do? As a result, what kind of learning experiences do you think they need? They will always get through experiential learning. You can build support in any community that you're in if you take the time to have parent conversations, right? I think all of you have seen that, would agree with that. Jess, you buy that? If you have the conversation, will this work?
Well, I mean, I think there's definitely ways to structure and facilitate these conversations. I'm sure you all are very practiced in, and we know, like, when we think about how like bringing folks to the table, like there's all these things around, are you just inviting them in? Like, have you considered things? Are you bringing the table to them? Like, there's all these considerations that we go back and forth on, like what does true intentional co-design look and feel like? And so I think that there's definitely ways in which that's very successful, and it really starts with that empathy work and meeting folks where you are. And as Monica was talking, I was thinking about the analogous context of mutual aid and all the mutual aid projects that we're seeing around the country right now. And there's no saviors in mutual aid. Just everybody coming and bringing what they have, when they have it. And I think similarly, if we begin to think of our communities, our schools, our educators, our students as like no one is here to save anyone or to, and we're thinking about how we like redistribute and share power, it could be the foundation for some really powerful co-design and work and imagining with folks.
Tom, I think that we've been talking a lot about how to change the conditions for students. We talk about the graduate, their profile. I think we really need to talk about how we're changing the conditions for educators.
Thank you.
Educational leaders. Because if we don't, to Jess's point, I mean, I think about school as McDonald's factories, and your concern is that people are buying more of the same hamburger meat and delivering it to all the kids. That's your biggest issue. But how do we all get in the kitchen and say, I really don't know how to make this pancake or this really cool flourless chocolate, but we're going to figure it out and we're going to learn as we go. And even better, we're going to do it with our youth. So we need to create these design studios that are not just impacting what we are providing our youth, but they are impacting the educator. They're creating the conditions so our educators can be designers and we be co-designing. And then we need to connect all these different environments and ecosystems together so that we can continue to learn from one another and identify those really brilliant spots of energy that we can, rally behind.
You've kicked off a whole pancake and cookie stream now in chat, Chris.
I think Jess started it.
I love the great comments about design studios, portfolios, presentations, and paper. I love that.
Just as a note, food brings us all together. So I also am enjoying seeing all the food references. That's a piece of the community work. Once we're able to safely do that again, is those shared experiences. So enjoying all the references.
Yeah, Jess, I'm thinking about the challenge in the next 30 days. So many decisions are going to be made in the next 30 days, and people they're trying to engage their community, but it's like super difficult to do it in this pandemic age. I don't know, any more thoughts on how do we authentically engage and design as we're thinking about bringing kids back to school in new and different ways? So I'll start with Jess, but anybody else specific to that topic?
I think there's two things that we've been thinking about a lot. One being how do we create a sense of shared experience while we're in different spaces. So whether that is kind of physical items or rituals and things like that. And the other is about how we are building networks. I'm also, in addition to being an educator, I'm also an organizer, and I think a lot about how the smallest unit of coalition building is two. So how do we really privilege having these kind of one-on-one conversations and building community in these small ways that then have the potential to scale up because we have deeper investments in who we are and who each other are. So one of the hacks that I've really enjoyed seeing that brings the virtual into, that brings the usual shared physical experience into a virtual setting is folks get on Zoom, they pull up a driving video, so video that just shows you the front, what you would see if you were sitting in the front of a car. You turn off your video and you just talk. You talk as if you're on that drive together. You're watching the same thing, you're in a shared experience, and then you have that kind of like the car ride conversations that we've learned can become very deep. So yeah, just thinking about what are some of those creative ways to foster connection, especially on that one-on-one one-on-one level.
Thank you, Jess. I really appreciate that. As we're wrapping, Chris and Monica, closing thoughts about how school and system leaders can be supporting teachers. Both, I want to talk both short and long term. Chris, I had hoped to dive into teacher prep and development, but maybe a couple quick thoughts on how do we need to support our teachers in the next 90 days as we get ready for something completely new and different, and then how might you summarize a different and better future of teacher support?
Well, I think we need to break away from this idea that a teacher is the ruler of their kingdom and they work with 30 or 60 students and they do it on their own. If we're not collaborating, if we're not, and I'll build on Jess's thing, and we're in a design period. You made this point, Tom. We need to be iterating. We don't have all the answers, but that's not the point. I mean, the point is we need to connect, collaborate, learn from one another. Let's do it not within systems. Let's go across systems. I mean, if I were going to make a challenge, which I almost feel compelled to do, but I would say, like, let's get our networks together and host these design studios, there's virtual design studios, and let's make sure the educational leaders, either in their schools or school systems, are creating the space and opportunity for their educators to get in the design studios and not worry that they have to be perfect, but they're learning, and that we are learning together, and we're in service of providing the best opportunity for our youth to be able to know who they are and to feel like they have a place to be.
Yeah, back to purpose. I would, Barbara Dill Varga put this on the chat around personalized learning networks and organizing students in cohorts with adult teams. I think we have to cohort our adults and our students, right? And it's Chris's point, like teachers can't teach in isolation. And that's already done enough in a physical building. And now it's going to be done even more on this online environment if we can't figure out how we have our teachers communicate and connect over Zoom. But also if teachers don't feel safe. I mean, the real issue is like, we have to make sure that our families and our teachers feel like it's safe for them to go back to school. And we all know it's been politicized, and we don't need to talk about that, but we need to talk about what are the safety measures so they can feel like they can do what really is blended learning, that they can take opportunities to teach in a physical space and to teach virtually, and that they can organize their time around to do this, and they can do this in cohorts. But we are stuck, for good or bad, with blended learning, and there are ways now to harness this, because I live in California. Schools were closed last year for fires, right? So like, why have we not moved to this hybrid model at large? And you've got to turn a good crisis into an opportunity. We've got to find ways to support our teachers, and that's cohorting them as well as our students.
All right, for the teachers and teacher leaders out there, final closing words of advice. Something they think about, something they can do different and better in the first weeks of school. I'm just going to echo Ken's comment about do an interdisciplinary project instead of siloed content. Man, if there's any way that you can work with a fellow teacher to build a block and do something integrated, community connected, if your kids can get them outside and connect to their community in any way, I think it can be unusually valuable. So that's going to be mine. Jess, any closing words of advice you want to offer? Can't hear you.
Got it. I was really struck by what Monica was just talking about, like really creating safety for educators. And we've talked a lot about cohort models. So yeah, I definitely think finding your people, creating a learning network or a community of practice to really get into, as best as you can, a cycle of theory and learning and reflection that you can build into your work at large. Yeah, that'd be a piece.
We appreciate that. Get Monica's book, Deeper Learning. Monica, quick closing thought.
Yeah, just show care and compassion and empathy.
Thank
and
you.
find ways to
Be good to each other, right?
That's right.
Put that at the top of the list. Appreciate that. Unger, thanks
Yeah.
for being a co-sponsor, for being such a useful provocateur and good friend of this movement.
I would just, everybody's already connecting online here, right? The CAP network, our next network, the people on the chat window. Find your allies and friends and make relationships and start sharing and talking with one another. If we're in our own little systems, we can feel like we're stuck. But get outside your system, talk with others, talk with Ken Martin out there in Tahoe, reach out to Getting Smart, figure out ways to connect with other people who have new imagination and visions of what's possible, and connect with them so you can keep your own fire lit.
Yeah. Corey, thanks for bringing us all together. What a great day. We appreciate it.
My goodness. Well, Tom, thank you so much for your ability to navigate the conversation and just to pull so much great dialogue here. And our panelists, my goodness, and the chat just went bananas, which is amazing. And see, I used another.
And cookies and pancakes.
Yeah. Ceramics, cookies, pan. I mean, we had a lot of references going there, but that was part of the fun. And we do like fun with what we do. So thank you very much. So blessed to have you all as part of this. I'm going to have Lydia kind of sweep over and join me here as we just quickly wrap up the day and kind of put a bow on it. And we do have the ability, if anyone wants to connect, and I know this is a big focus for a lot of us, and certainly for our man, Dr. Unger, the idea that you have to find your people, you have to find those and build those connections. We wanted to create a space where if you still haven't quite grabbed that conversation, you haven't found that person, or you have something else to share, reflect on, that you have an open space to do so. So once we leave this general session, there will be the opportunity at preparingforpurpose.org to click a link to go to the virtual happy hour and join some conversation there. But Lydia, I'm just so thankful to the partners, to Northeastern for being a co-host of this. I'm blown away. I'm probably going to sleep very well tonight because I've just had such a full day, an exciting day. Lydia, what would you like to share?
Well, as I shared with you earlier today, Corey, I dreamed all night about this conference, and today actually was better than the dream. It's been an amazing day of connecting networks and people and ideas. And I do think that when we think about the things we care about, we do share the answers. We have the answers for one another. We have a way forward if we retain these connections and dig into the work and engage our kids and our families, our communities, our partners. It's been a very inspiring day, and I look forward to the work that we have in front of us. As a representative of a higher ed partner, we have a lot of responsibility that we need to pick up, and I'm excited to be part of that work.
Yeah, me too. And I think a lot of folks just looking at the chat window and the commentary are right there with you, Lydia, and with us in wanting to move this forward. Quick thought, Tom had asked a question to the panel. I'm wondering, Lydia, for you, what's a takeaway? What's one quick thing that someone could do if they wanted to move forward and connect with others?
Obviously join Next, since we have the platform to engage in conversation and learning. And also, I mean, quite honestly, one of the pieces we're working on is developing prior learning that gives college credit for work being done. So trying to make that change. Corey, what about you?
Yeah, awesome. I would just say, if you're wanting to kind of dive into experiential learning kind of more broadly, absolutely be a part of Next. CAPS is part of Next. A lot of our affiliates are a part of Next. It's a great forum to connect with others. if for whatever reason you've got a fire lit under you around profession-based learning, you want to go really deep, especially with high school students, we would love to talk to you. But honestly, we're a resource. We want to just see more and more of this activity. And so whether it's becoming an official member of any one brand or not, that is kind of irrelevant. We want to tip the scales. We want to hit the tipping point, get more kids this experience, and flip the whole system upside down.
Including for educators. I like that we ended on that note. That was a beautiful note to end on.
Wonderful. Well, folks, went ahead and put the link in the chat. I will do that again for the virtual happy hour. We'd love to just follow up with you and get your reflections if that is something that is interesting to you. Otherwise, thanks for being with us. We will have these sessions recorded and archived at preparingforpurpose.org for your future use. And we will definitely be doing something like this again soon. As Dr. Unger likes to say, Viva la revolution. Let's go.
Be well.
Thank you.